welcome back. In the last segment we had discussed about the internal and external environment and how the internal and external environmental analysis helps you to understand what kind of strengths and weaknesses you have, as well as what kind of opportunities and threats exist in the marketplace. Now, once we have looked into the environment analysis and once we have defined overarching vision and mission of the organization, the next thing is where we have to set specific objectives. Now, objectives are short term or not short term per se, but objectives are time bound and specific things that the organization needs to achieve in order to achieve the overarching vision of the organization. So, objectives generally are considered to be specific, measurable, achievable and time bound. This is something that requires to be provided in such a way that you are able to say what that objective is in a very specific manner. You are able to define how that objective can be measured towards the end of it. It should be also time bound. So, objectives cannot be something very vague or something that is just a overarching statement like the vision or mission statement. It has to be more specific, more measurable and more time bound in nature. So, that is why setting objectives is very critical when it comes to retail operations. Now, any organization which decides to set objectives has to look into its own internal capabilities and its own the environment in which it exists, and thereby it has to define what kind of an organization does it have to be. So, in the marketing literature we generally talk about segmentation, targeting and positioning. So, segmentation is done where I discussed this earlier as well. Segmentation is done where we take the entire market and assume that the market is heterogeneous in nature, because different customers have different requirements, different needs and wants and demands, etc. So, we try to break the entire heterogeneous market into smaller groups which we assume to be homogeneous within themselves, and they are going to be mutually exclusive between groups. The reason why we do this is, now a smaller group is easier to handle because of the fact that the consumers within that smaller group have common preferences or preferences that can be relatable within that group itself. And once we do that, we have to now position ourselves in the customer's mind by creating what kind of factors are there wherein we are trying to differentiate ourselves. So, by defining very clear and very specific objectives, we are going to now tell ourselves that this is what we want to achieve. But in order to arrive at those objectives, we will also have to keep in mind what kind of internal capabilities we have, what kind of external environment are we operating in, and what kind of customer are we trying to address. So, that is why segmentation, targeting and positioning is also to be done as part of the objective creation activity. Once you have set objectives, then you can go ahead and take different decisions about all different retail strategy mix elements. Right. Now, how can a retail organization think about setting objectives? There are different frameworks or different ways by which objectives can be set. Say for example, I am going to introduce 3 methods by which you can set objectives. One of them is EST based strategies, the second one is a blue ocean strategy, and the third one is a scenario based strategy. Now, I will start with the scenario based strategy. The scenario based strategy is where you look into the environment, you try to understand what kind of environment exists in the organization, what is the competitive scenario, what is that you want to achieve within the competitive scenario, and based on that scenario you are going to define what the objective is going to be. Say for example, if you find that there is already a strong retail presence in the market where you are trying to enter, and there is going to be certain differentiators or certain positioning strategies that each of your competitors have created, you might want to choose a strategy that is closer to one of the competitors, or you want to differentiate yourself with one of the parameters, but there is no one defining way in which you can do it. It is going to be more based on the scenario in which you are getting into. So, it requires much more deeper understanding of what the entire scenario is like. So, that is where the environmental analysis will help you. But like I told you, objectives have to be specific, measurable and time bound as well. So, that is where scenario based planning will help you to look into the entire scenario and then come out with one specific strategy or one specific set of objectives that will help you achieve the greater vision of the organization. Now, the second one that I will introduce is how you can create objectives based on EST based strategy. There are 5 basic EST based strategies that we will talk about in retail operations. One is where we are talking about being cheapest. The second one is where we are talking about being the easiest. Third is where we are talking about being the hottest. Fourth is where we are talking about being the biggest, and fifth is where we are talking about being the quickest. Now, each of these terms, you will see that towards the end they have EST, and that is the reason why all of them are called as EST based strategies, right. Now, I will talk about each of them for a little time. Cheapest, easiest, hottest, biggest and quickest are the 5 types of strategies that you can or 5 types of objectives that you can choose to be. Now if I choose to be the cheapest in the market, that means that I am going to focus my attention on pricing strategies and on sourcing strategies to make sure that the price at which the consumer is buying the product from me is going to be the lowest in the market. So that is where the focus of the strategy that I will have, the focus of all the different retail mix elements would be on creating a merchandise that is available to the customer at the cheapest cost in the market, or the price has to be the lowest. When I am talking about easiest, I am basically going to focus on the fact that I'll provide greater customer services to my end customers. So this is where I'll focus on creating an experience for the customer where everything that the customer wants, all kinds of assistance in shopping is provided to the customer, and thereby the customer services part or the experience part is going to be highlighted, and that is where my attention is going to be. So all retail mix elements will be created in such a way that I will be able to provide the greatest amount of services to customer and make the customer's role or customer's shopping experience much more easier. When I am talking about being the hottest, I am going to talk about fashion brands and being up to date when it comes to fashion. Rather than focusing on creating greater services, or rather than creating cheaper products or making available cheaper products, I might have the objective of making sure that my products are the most trendiest and my products are the hottest products, or the most fashionable products that are available in the marketplace. So I will focus on making sure that the merchandise is the best that is available. If I am focusing on being the biggest in the market, then the factor that I will be looking at is to have the largest assortment and the greatest variety of products in the store. So I will try to be the biggest player in the marketplace, where the customer can find anything and everything that the customer is looking for. That will be the focus of that I as an organization will be putting forth, and that is where I will think about creating a retail marketing mix which will enable me to do all of these things so that I can be the biggest. And the last one, where I think about being the quickest in the market, I will be focusing on creating convenience to customers, and by convenience I mean that the customer can come into the retail store, finish all the shopping and then move out of the retail store without having to spend too much time. So you can assume what kind of stores will be focusing on being the quickest in the marketplace, but that again is an objective that the company can form. So these are 5 basic guiding principles. So for example, if I am talking about a everyday low pricing company, say for example if I am talking about DMart for example, they choose to be a company that wants to focus on being the cheapest in the market because they provide everyday low price strategy. Now if I am talking about somebody like a luxury retail store like Tanishq, they focus on being the easiest for the customer if the customer wants to buy jewelry. The customer is provided all kinds of services. There are people who are experienced and understand the kind of jewelry requirements, the kind of jewelry manufacturing, different kinds of gems and stones that are used in jewelry, etc. So the customer's job is very easy when it comes to shopping in such a store. When we are talking about, say for example Zara or H&M, etc., which are into fast fashion, we are talking about them being the hottest in the market because they are focusing on creating fashion or manufacturing a lot of fashion goods that when we quickly transfer to stores and make sure that the stores always have a lot of products which are the trending fashion or the most hottest in the marketplace. When we talk about brands like Walmart, like Big Bazaar, etc., we are talking about them focusing on being the biggest in the market. So they have different product categories or a very wide variety of products that they offer. At the same time, they also have great assortment of products within all of them. And when I am focusing on being the quickest in the market, I am talking about a lot of convenience stores, wherein the customer can come into the convenience store, quickly buy whatever the consumer wants to buy in a high frequency kind of scenario, and thereby they can get in the store, finish their purchases and come out of the store without spending too much time there. So that is where my focus is going to be on convenience rather than on anything else. Depending on what kind of EST strategies you choose, your marketing mix elements are going to be defined later on. So that is scenario based is one element wherein you don't have one direction to go through. You look into the scenario and set objectives. EST strategies basically give you 5 different directions that you can go through. You can choose one of these directions and you can say that this is the direction that I will choose, but even in this direction you will have to set specific objectives. Now the third one is where we talk about blue ocean strategy. Now blue ocean strategy is where you are trying to create an uncontested marketplace. In many of these cases, both in the scenario based planning case and also in the EST based strategy, strategies, you are assuming that there is going to be the competitor and you are trying to differentiate yourself from the competitor, but you are still fighting for the same market share, and you are still fighting for the same customer group or similar customer groups who might come to you and might go to the competitor as well. So this is generally what is known as a red ocean, where you are competing and you are trying to get as much as possible from the same market. Rather than doing that, there is another strategy which is called blue ocean strategy, wherein we are trying to create an uncontested marketplace, or we are creating a niche for ourselves wherein we won't have specific competitors. The way you do it is by breaking the industry standards, either by innovating yourself, either by increasing the value that you offer to customers, by reducing a lot of things that the industry takes as standard, and by making sure that such things are now not available to the industry in general, by making sure that you are able to raise a lot of offerings to customers, by reducing price and such kinds of cost to customers. You might be able to create a very innovative place for yourself, which might not be easily imitable by the competitors, and thereby you will have a space like in an ocean. You have gotten out of all the places where there is a lot of competition, and you are free to explore the market on your own, because the kind of offerings that you provide to customers are such that the customer now finds exceptionally great value in you, so the customer keeps coming back to you rather than going elsewhere. Now when e-commerce companies and internet based retailers came into the market, they were able to create such a place which was not contested by a lot of other people, because of multitude of factors, because of the convenience that they provided, because of the fact that they had free home delivery, cash on delivery was provided to customers, free returns were possible, and no question asked returns were possible. You were able to provide all sorts of products to the customers, so the variety and assortment of products on e-commerce platforms, etc., was quite significant. So for a long period of time, e-commerce platforms had dominated because of such a strategy. So you can either go with a scenario based planning strategy, you can go with a EST based strategy, or you can go with a blue ocean strategy. These are just directions as to how you can think about what your objective in the market should be. And once you set objectives which are going to be specific, measurable, time bound, etc., you are now going to think about the retail planning system and talk about the retail mix elements. So in the next segment, we will come back and talk about the different elements that we are going to discuss as part of the retail mix, and we will talk about each of them in some detail. Like I told you, we will come back in later sessions, and each session will be discussing about one or a few of these retail mix elements in the later sessions. So now that we have set objectives, and we have looked into the internal and external factors or environmental factors that influence the setting of objectives, the next element is where we have to get into identifying what are going to be the retail mix elements, or what decisions do you take in order to achieve these objectives, and what are going to be the tactical decisions that you are going to make. So in order to arrive at this, we need to understand what are the different decision areas that are to be pondered upon in detail when we are thinking about creating a retail strategy. Now I basically have classified all the different retail decision areas into 8 different boxes, which is one way of looking at it. We will also be using such a framework when we are going forward and discussing these things in details in the sessions to come. So the first of these elements is location and format. The reason why I'll count out all of them, and then we will come back to each of them. So location and format is the first one. The second one is the merchandise mix. Then we are talking about store layout and visual merchandising. Then we are talking about pricing. Then we talk about promotion. Then we talk about employee management or human resource management. Then we talk about supply chain management and information technology. And finally we talk about customer relationship management and customer experience management. Now by location and format, format of course we discussed in the last session, in one of the earlier sessions, wherein we spoke about what kind of variety and assortment do you want to have in your store. Depending on the variety and assortment of products, we can divide stores into different formats. What kind of services do you want to offer in the store? Do you want to be a limited service offering? You want to be a full service offering, etc., etc. What kind of ownership structure do you want to have? Do you want to have franchisee mechanisms? Do you want to lease departments? Do you want to own the entire thing? Do you want to be a store chain operation, or do you want to be an independent player in the market? All of these decisions are going to be now thought about when you are thinking about the format, the store format. there is also an important and one of the most important decisions that you have to take, which is about the location where the store is going to be set up. The reason why location is a very critical decision is because many times stores are made or broken based on the location preferences that are chosen. You need to have, and the reason why location is so critical is the fact that it is not a very easy decision to go wrong and then rectify, because one, you are investing a lot of money in real estate and investing a lot of money in setting up the entire store, so it might be difficult for you to keep reverting that decision, keep switching locations every now and then. So location decisions are extremely critical because these are long term decisions. These are decisions that need to be thought about very carefully rather than just taken out of haste. So location and format is the first area where you have to think about what decisions you have to make when we are thinking about retail strategy. The next is where we are talking about what kind of products need to be sold in the marketplace. This is where we talk about merchandise mix. The merchandise mix basically is going to talk about the variety and assortment of products that are being sold in the retail store. So like we discussed in one of the earlier sessions, variety is going to be the type of category of different types with different product categories that you are going to offer in the retail store, and assortment is going to be the different number of items that are offered in each of these product categories. Now you have to assess how many different categories of products do you want to store and how many different items do you want within each of these categories. It can be as low as a convenience store where the variety and assortment both are low. It can be as high as a hypermarket store where variety and assortment both are very high. So it can be anything between these two, and which are these product categories, that also is something that you have to choose depending on the kind of retailer you want to be. Now the reason why merchandise decisions are important is because many times merchandising decisions are very complex. Like in one of the earlier sessions when I told you the example of an organized retail store which has between 10,000 to 20,000 different stock keeping units in the store at any given point of time, which might be in many different categories, it is very difficult for you to manage how to ensure that you have sufficient amount of stock, you have the entire store that is managed properly, so that the customers who are coming into the store can find the products in the right shelf at the right point of time that they are looking for the product. So that is one important element that makes sure that merchandising is critical. The next thing is that because many times the companies that are operating in the retail space today have a significant portion of their merchandise as private labels. Private labels is where we are talking about retail specific or store specific brands that are sold in the retail store. Now the reason why there are private labels is because it makes business sense to do so. I will come to that in one of the later sessions, but you also need to think about how much and what kind of what category of products should there be private label brands, etc. So because of all of these reasons, the merchandise mix is the second important decision area that we will talk about, and that is important when we are thinking about the retail strategy part of it. The third one is where we are talking about the store layout and visual merchandise. The store layout basically is how is that the customer will come into the store, move around the store and get out of the store. So what is the flow of traffic going to be, and how is that the customer is going to be directed to different parts of the store. So that is what is basically the decision area where we talk about the store layout. There are different layouts. You will find that a high end luxury apparel store doesn't have the same layout as a department store. There are reasons why they are done so. The store layout is now going to give different experiences to customers, and there are different objectives that customers have when they come to different types of stores, and that is why the store layout has to be such that it adds convenience and doesn't add confusion and waste time of the customer. The second element in this area is where we talk about visual merchandising. Visual merchandising is the way in which the store is displaying merchandise and other promotional material. So this is where we talk about the store having a pattern by which different products are arranged in different shelves. We are going to talk about a little bit about point of purchase display or point of sale displays. We are going to talk about what are the different elements, what are the different areas in the store that can be used as display areas, wherein you can highlight products, you can keep products that are on a markdown or discounted, etc. So we will talk about all of these different areas which are part of the layout of the store and how visual merchandising is to be done. The next decision area, like you can see on the screen, is the pricing of the products on the store. Now, like I told you yesterday briefly, or in the last session briefly, there are different pricing formats that the retail operation can choose, which includes at a very basic level, it includes high-low pricing and everyday low pricing. You need to choose what kind of pricing strategies do you want to have depending on the category of products and depending on the segment of customers where you are trying to sell. So that is where pricing decisions are important to be taken, and many times pricing decisions have a direct bearing on how much revenue that the company make. So hence pricing decisions also have to be thought about in very serious note. And the next element that we talk about is promotion. Promotion is basically all the different communication activities that the company does or the retail organization does, so that it can either achieve a set of long term objectives or achieve a set of short term objectives. The short term objectives are going to be as simple as increasing the sales in the current time period. The long term objectives are going to be more loyalty from customers and more awareness of the brand, etc. So there are different vehicles like advertising, sales promotion, personal selling, public relations, etc., that can be used to create a retail image as to what the retailer actually represents, and also to achieve short term objectives of increasing sales in the current time period or increasing sales in a festive season, etc. So that is where we will discuss about all the different decisions that have to be taken when it comes to promotional activities. So the next element that we discuss is about employee relations and managing human resources in the retail firm. The reason why human resources are so critical is because of the fact that retail operations is technically more closer to being a service than being an actual good, although a lot of goods are exchanged. So that is why we need to always keep employees happy and employees trained and motivated, because otherwise the experience that the customers have in the service context is not going to be as rich as what you expect it to be. So that is why maintaining a good HRM practice is essential when it comes to retail operations. So everything from identifying to recruiting to motivating employees and monitoring their performance so that it can be improved over time is essential when it comes to retail strategy. The next of the retail strategy elements that we discussed include supply chain management and information technology. The reason why supply chain management and information technology is so critical is because of the fact that many of the retail organizations need to ensure that the merchandise is available at the right place, at the right time, at the right price for the customer to buy. And one way of ensuring all of this happens is by having supply chain mechanisms that are so efficient enough that the produce can be taken from the manufacturer or through the marketing channel and can be available in the retail store at any given point of time when the customer is looking for the product. There are no stock out situations. Stock out is when the product is not available in the retail store when a customer is looking for it, which basically leads to a lot of dissatisfaction among the customers, and because of which the customers have a higher likelihood of going to another retailer where they might find the product and they might keep visiting in the subsequent time as well. So you might end up losing customers if you are having stock out situations. Similarly, there are other problems with respect to logistics as well. For example, you might have situations where you have more than required amount of stock because of say reasons like the bullwhip effect, wherein inefficiencies in the supply chain are now going to become great problems when it comes to the retail operation. So that is why supply chain management is extremely important, and because information technology is an enabler to making sure that there is much more efficient supply chain mechanisms and logistics are done much more better and merchandise planning, etc., is done properly. There are a lot of retail operations that today use a lot of information technology, and that is also something that we will discuss in some detail. And the last of the retail strategy elements is the customer relationship management and customer experience management. This is where we will talk about what services are and how retail services should be planned in such a way that they provide exceptionally good experiences to customers. And like I told you in one of the previous sessions, the game is not just to acquire and sell products to customers as transactions, but it is important that we have relationships, long lasting relationships with customers, so that we can have these retained customers to keep coming back and purchasing more and more from us. So that is why many of the retail organizations today have loyalty programs or relationship management programs put in place, so that they can have a bond with the customer and have some incentives shared with the customer which will enable them to keep coming back to us. So that is the last element that we will discuss about when it comes to the retail strategy mix elements. So this in sum is a small introduction to what this retail strategy elements are. In the next segment we are going to come back and discuss about retail monitoring system and what kind of retail monitoring system has to be put in place. So now that we have discussed all the different boxes that we defined when we started off with the retail strategy framework, we started off from the top where we defined what is going to be the vision, mission, value, and how it is important for the organization to identify a vision statement which is going to be the overarching purpose for which the organization exists, to have a mission statement that defines how you are going to achieve there, and have a guiding set of core principles. We defined about what the internal and external environment should be like and how you are going to assess the internal and external environment. By evaluating all these three factors, the vision, mission, values of the organization, by looking into the internal and external environment, now the organization can arrive at what the objectives are for a specified period of time. In order to achieve this objective, there are different areas that the organization has to now make decisions about, that include the location, that includes the format of the store, that includes the visual merchandising and the kind of merchandising mix that is there, that includes pricing and promotion decisions, it includes the decisions about human resource management, decisions about supply chain management, decisions about information technology to be used, and other things as well, like say for example customer relationship management. All of these things are the retail strategy mix elements that we discussed or introduced in some time. But one important thing after you have done all execution to achieve the objectives is where you need to keep monitoring whether or not the retail organization is performing as it expected to be. So retail monitoring systems are also exceptionally important when it comes to the retail strategy. This is where we get feedback about what are we in line to achieve the objectives and the vision that we have put forth, or we are getting lost in the entire process and we might be falling short of achieving the objectives. So this is where there should be mechanisms by which data can be collected, data can be analyzed, and data can be used to evaluate each of these parameters. So like I told you, when you set up objectives, the objectives are going to be specific and they are going to be measurable. Now we use retail analytics to make sure that we can assess whether the retail performance is going well or not. So this can be done in multiple ways. We can look into what is the total revenue or the top line that the retail organization is making, whether it is in line with the objectives of the company. We can also look into specific aspects which are related to how the merchandise is being managed. We can look into the margins that you are getting from each category of products and whether it is sufficient enough to achieve the objectives. We can look into gross margins that the organization per se is getting. We can look into gross margins that the organization is getting with respect to the kind of money is being spent on inventory, which is one of a very interesting and very frequently used methods of evaluating retail operations, where we look into gross margin return on inventory investment, wherein we see that for the amount of money that you are spending on inventory, what kind of margins are, what kind of returns are you getting based on gross margins. We look into how whether or not your employees are productive, wherein we look into gross margins that you are getting per employee, per full-time employee that you have in the organization, wherein we took into gross margin return on employees that you have. We will also look into the floor space, because in retail, in physical retail, the amount of floor space that you have is exceptionally critical, because you end up paying a lot of money to have such floor space. So we look into the square footage returns that you get for all of the retail operations. So that is where we look into gross margin returns on square footage that you have, and all of these factors can be used to compare between different retail stores that can be part of the same chain, or it can be used to compare between retail operations of multiple retail groups. So all of these parameters we will discuss in detail. You can also have other indices that can be used. Say for example, you can have return on investment on other parameters that can be evaluated, because now you have data for all of this. You can look into whether or not the assets that you have employed are getting sufficient returns. So all of these parameters are critical when it comes to retail monitoring system. We will discuss about each of these things. We will discuss about what are some of the frameworks that are important with respect to retail analytics per se, and we will have some examples where we will get into details of all of this. Apart from all the data that you collect directly from customers and all the data that is used in retail analytics that we discussed now, there are also other methods of collecting primary data when it comes to understanding whether or not customers are happy and whether or not customers are satisfied with what you are doing. So we will also discuss about how you can conduct primary surveys with respect to understanding customer satisfaction as well as employee satisfaction, and see what are the ways by which this can be devised and what are the ways by which you can run all of these things, so that you can at the end of the day not just have a lot of automated data that is collected from the point of sale and collected from the ordering or the procurement departments, but also have a little bit of information which is softer in nature, which will also help you assess what kind of services are you offering, what kind of experiences are the customers perceiving, and whether or not you can improve your presence in the market. There are other methods of doing analytics also. In the session that is dedicated to retail analytics, I will discuss all of these things in detail. So the role of retail analytics is basically to give you feedback to ensure whether or not you are achieving the objective. So if you look into the entire retail strategy framework, we basically have a closed loop system wherein we start off from defining organization level very overarching kind of objectives, or what is the vision, mission and value statements of the organization, which is going to be the purpose for which the organization exists, and we look into the internal and external environment to arrive at the objectives, time bound specific objectives that the organization should work on. In order to achieve these objectives, we defined 8 different areas where the organization can now make decisions, or the organization has to pay close attention to. This included the visual merchandising, the merchandising mix, the layout, the location, etc., 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 all of these things. And finally, you have a retail monitoring system that is going to make sure that every single act that you do in each of these different 8 elements is now constantly evaluated and the feedback is provided to each of these elements in case there needs to be an adjustment, so that at the end of the time period that you have defined, you are able to achieve these objectives. So in sum, this is the strategy framework which we will discuss throughout this course, but again, like I started off in the beginning of this discussion on retail strategy, when you are thinking about strategy, think about having sustainable competitive advantage. Sustainable competitive advantage should be valuable, it should be rare, it should be inimitable, and it should be organized. So that is where your end game should be to have sustainable competitive advantage in the marketplace, and all these retail strategy elements are going to help you achieve sustainable competitive advantage. We'll as we move forward, we are going to discuss each of these elements. In the next session, we will come back and start off with identifying or discussing further on location and what kind of decisions are to be taken when you are thinking about store location. We will discuss about why store location is a critical decision, and we will also discuss about some models by which, or some methods by which you can arrive at what is the best location that you can choose for your retail store. So that is going to happen in the next session. Thank you very much for now.